Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber for Breakfast. We're now in our 20th episode of 2025. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor of Fiber for Breakfast. You know, we're now just 2.5 weeks away from Fiber Connect 2025 in Nashville, which kicks off June 1st. And while we continue to set new attendance records every year for the past 5 years in a row, this year we have taken Fiber Connect to yet another level to maximize the experience for our audience. And if you haven't registered, please go to the FBA website, fiberbroadband.org, and go under events and register. You're not going to want to miss this special event. You know, after Fiber Connect, the Fiber Broadband Association will continue to work its way around North America. So far, our regional Fiber Connect workshops in San Antonio and Philadelphia have been sold out. And our next regional fiber workshop will be in Anchorage, Alaska on July 17th. And after Anchorage, we'll be in Toronto in August, Spokane in September, Scottsdale in October, Kansas City in November, and then we'll finish out the year with our premier member meeting in Palm Springs, December 8th and 9th. You know, I mentioned our next regional Fiber Connect workshop will be in Alaska. You know, the Fiber Broadband Association has recently completed a study of the fiber to home deployments in each of the 50 states. And unfortunately, Alaska remains 50th place. David, can you show up that the map of the U.S.? And these are, you can see how they're color coded. So Alaska is in last place. In 2013, our study shows that Alaska deployed fiber to the home to 2.3% of homes in its state, 2.3%. And in 2024, fiber to the home is now deployed to only 13% of its homes. So in comparison, Arkansas had fiber to 1.8% of its homes in 2013. That's about half of what Alaska had at that time. And by 2024, it had nearly 63% of its homes passed with fiber. Connecticut's another example, again, was less than Alaska in 2013, only had 2.6% of its homes passed with fiber. And in 2024, it's now over 72%, 72.5% of homes passed with fiber. So this is why FBA believes it's so important that our next regional Fiber Connect workshop be in Alaska. And the discussion on Alaska is also very timely, as today's guest on Fiber Breakfast is Christina Woolston, the CEO of Old Harbor Native Corporation, who's here to discuss Project Nunapet, connecting tribal communities and cultures across Kodiak Islands. Before I formally introduce today's guest, I will introduce David Norris from the team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you for everyone who's joined us today. We appreciate it. Before I go over a few logistics, we'd just like to once again thank our platinum sponsor, Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco. Now, as participants, you are in listen-only mode today. To ask a question, please type it into the question box, which is located in the lower left-hand side of your screen. And we will host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's presentation. This presentation is also being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours. And you can find that recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. Finally, at the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. Please take a moment to respond. We appreciate your input. And with that, I will pass things back over to Gary to get us started. Gary?
Thanks, David, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest was Erin Scarborough, the Senior Vice President of Mass Market Product Management at AT&T, who discussed AT&T's innovative product rollout as the company connects 50 million homes across the nation with fiber by the end of 2029. If you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Fiber Breakfast, our guest is Christina Woolston, the CEO of Old Harbor Native Corporation, discuss Project Nunapet, connecting tribal communities and culture across the Kodiak Island. Christina joined Old Harbor Native Corporation as the Executive Vice President in July 2024 and was promoted to CEO the beginning of this year. Christina is an Alaska Native shareholder of Bristol Bay Native Corporation and Pawtech Ltd. And a tribal member of the Naknek Native Village Council. Christina was born and raised in Naknek, where she commercial fished each summer with her family and took part in traditional hunting and gathering for subsistence purposes. She's earned a bachelor's degree in government from Dartmouth. And prior to Old Harbor, Christina served as the head of external affairs for Donlin Gold, a high-grade pure gold development project partnership with Alaska Native landowners, Calista Corporation, and Cusco Quim Corporation. Before Donlin, Christina was the vice president of external affairs for Quintilium, the company that built and now operates the first subsea fiber optic cable in North America, or the North American Arctic. And for more than 10 years, Christina has served as the vice president of government relations for Chanika Corporation. Alaska Native Village Corporation has provided tremendous benefits to the Native community through its significant global operations, figuring prominently in the diverse government services sector. Christina is also a senior fellow with Rasmussen Foundation, leading their effort to bring digital equity to all Alaskans. And early in Christina's career, she consulted on international oil and gas projects, the focus on European partners. So Christina, welcome. And for audience, please type in your questions as we go, and we'll work those into the Q&A discussion. With that, I will turn things over to Christina.
Gary, and thank you to your sponsors. We know that these worthy pursuits of sharing information and giving people access doesn't go without a price tag. So I do thank your sponsors for that, certainly. Appreciate the warm introduction. I'm here to talk about Project Nunapet, which is a transformational project that will connect fiber into 4 Alaska Native tribal communities. I'm going to show some slides here about Alaska and the remote and ruggedness of our communities, the challenges that it takes to build, install, and operate any sort of infrastructure in rural Alaska. It's a challenge. We're getting better at it. Certainly, we are the experts in cold, in remote, in tough. And that's, something that we're pretty proud of, but sometimes we wish it was a little easier to do so. So the Project Nunapet is part of the NTIA's Round 2 Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program grant, and it was about a $65 million grant that we were awarded earlier this year. We're awaiting some of the details, as you can imagine, with many projects happening right now with the transition into the new administration. There are some delays, there are some communication challenges and finding the right people. So we're working through those right now, but the grant was awarded in partnership with Alaska Communication Systems. And I've worked with ACS, as we call them in Alaska, on a number of other projects, including the Quintilian project up on the North Slope of Alaska into 5 subsea communities back in 2017 and 2018. And so we've got some experience with some remote projects. What I'd love to do is give a little bit of a background. If we could go to the next slide. I want to talk about Old Harbor Native Corporation and Native corporations in general to give some context about why, as corporations, we are different than what you might find in a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ or some other stock exchange or any other public company. We were created for a different purpose. When oil was discovered, you can see the Arctic Slope region on this map. When oil was discovered in the 50s and 60s in the northern region of Alaska, Alaska's indigenous people who've been there for thousands of years, which is my heritage, took exception to the land development without realizing and coming to some conclusion around our land's dispute. We had claims to the land because of our indigenous ownership and heritage there. And so Congress, recognizing that they needed to do something different than perhaps the reservation model in the lower 48 with its indigenous and traditional people, created what were called Alaska Native corporations. And you can see on the map, there are 12, divided into 12 regions. And you have the 12 regions, and then you also have within there 225 village corporations, and Old Harbor is a village corporation. So by law, we were given by the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act of 1971 some lands and a small amount of money to create for-profit companies that would go out and be part of the Western economy. We invested in businesses, we started local businesses, we do government contracting, oil and gas services. Old Harbor has a lease equipment fleet that we deploy onto the North Slope. We have a rental car company. We repair roofs. We repair Navy ships in various parts of the United States for the federal government. So we're pretty diversified. But at the end of the day, we have a duality of purpose. Our purpose is to make a profit, and that profit is returned to our Alaska Native or our native shareholders. When I say shareholder, it means somebody like myself who has a traditional tie to the land, and we were connected to that land in 1971. Our shares cannot be bought, traded, sold on the market. They're only handed down to our children and to our families. So we have a big purpose, we have a big responsibility, and the way that we accomplish meeting the needs of our community are different for every region and every community. For Old Harbor, I'll go into some of the things that we reinvest in to provide for social, economic, education, and employment opportunities, and social needs within our community. If we could go to the next slide, please. So Project Nunapet is, and here's a map. You can see the star, that's the village of Old Harbor. It's on Kodiak Island. And the Kodiak Island archipelago is comprised of a number of villages and communities, all with traditional ties with the Alutiiq culture and the Supiaq language. The broadband network itself, the fiber network, will start in Homer, which is on the mainland of Alaska, on the peninsula there. It'll go subsea, and then it'll make landfall at Uzinki, the village of Uzinki. And while, the middle mile subsea fiber optic cable runs onto Kodiak Island, we'll use some festooning to move about the island, ultimately connecting the native communities of Chiniak, Old Harbor, Akiak, and Women's Bay. So it will serve approximately 570 homes. It will also service the Pacific Spaceport Complex, which is on the southwest portion of the Kodiak Island, closest to the community of Kodiak, for services related to their testing facility for missile launch, which is really a pretty spectacular facility. Right now, we're currently serviced by microwave and satellite services. And so this will provide true broadband through fiber throughout the Kodiak archipelago. If you look at some of the other areas of Alaska, you can see the Aleutian Island chain spans down on the left. You got Togiak, king salmon. These are all additional areas of Alaska that will this next year, the coming years, be connected by fiber projects with a variety of other partnerships with other companies in Alaska, ACS, GCI, Quintillion, and I mentioned the Quintillion project that I worked on. So through a variety of public-private partnerships and grants, the rural communities in Alaska will be connected through fiber, through NTIA, tribal broadband, connectivity programs that have been funded the last few years. So an awful lot of mileage and fiber deployed through Alaska in the coming years. If we could have the next slide. So this is a view of the beaches near Old Harbor. Old Harbor is a traditional community, much like many of the other communities on Kodiak Island and like where I grew up, a commercial fishing village traditionally. So both subsistence sustenance of fish, salmon, crab, halibut. We also subsist off of oysters, scallops, kelp, other sea mammals, marine mammals, So those have always been traditional components of our diet and also clothing. So because it's a harsh place and there aren't stores traditionally in our communities, we make a lot of our provisions, and therefore we also have to bring a lot of provisions in. So if you fly from the East Coast, for example, say from Washington, D.C., you fly from Reagan to Seattle, to Anchorage, to Kodiak, to Old Harbor. And that's how you get to our community. So it's about a day and a half to get there. It's a little bit like flying overseas for a lot of people into a remote community. And it truly is. And we've invested in a number of infrastructure projects over the years that will help our community be self-sustaining and self-sufficient going forward. If you'll go to the next slide. This is a representation, some of the traditional regalia of the Alutiiq people. So you can see we use a lot of, when we harvest a marine mammal or a halibut or salmon, we use everything from that which gave us sustenance. So we use the furs, we use the insides for drums. We use them traditionally for sewing and for creating nets. So it's a beautiful place, but we learn to make do with what we have and to live off the land and off of the water. The island behind this beautiful group of Alutiiq people is called Sikalitic Island. Sikalitic Island is a very special place for us. If you go to the next slide. Oh, I switched my slide order, but I'll talk about this for a minute and then we'll go on to the next one. One of the things that we, as I mentioned, we do with what we have, and we're so grateful that we will now have the opportunity for true broadband into our communities and others on Kodiak Island. We've invested in things that have truly changed our community. We have true broadband coming in. We have invested in a bison herd on Sikalitic Island, which the island that I showed you in the slide previous. We will have over 300 head after the calves drop this spring. And we've worked with a number of entities out of Montana, out of Utah, to bring a diversification of the bison herd for food security and sustainability locally. We hope to turn that into commercial harvests, but these are all things that a variety of infrastructure are required for us to bring into the community. We, with another grant program, we will be initiating a hydroelectric project, which will provide for affordable power, reliable power in the communities. Right now, it's all run on diesel, and it's extremely expensive, unreliable, and not very clean. And so we're excited to have a run-of-river hydro project. We're just about done with the design phase right now, and then construction will begin next year with completion and turning up service end of 2026, 2027. The fiber project, if I may also connect back to that, is roughly the same time frame. So we will have a lot going on in our community to improve our infrastructure. In the last couple of years, we've also seen an expansion of our airport, which is really important because we are only accessible by water or by air. Most of Alaska is only accessible by air. Some communities are accessible by water. It is important for us to have reliable airport access where we bring most of our foods in. Medical emergencies, we also need to deploy from our airports. We saw an expansion to a 4,000-foot runway a few years ago in partnership with another grant with FAA and DOT, the Department of Transportation, and the Federal Transportation Act. So we're extremely excited about the expansion of infrastructure in our community that will allow us to grow our economy. If you go to the next slide. This is another project that we have locally. It's a farm. We have 4 hoop houses that allow us to grow vegetables and fruits. We have a small orchard. It's a community project. Kids and the school help us to harvest and to deploy locally to our Indigenous community members, starting with our Elders First, which is our traditional practice. All of these things require technology. We do a lot with smart monitoring and watering. And so these are all things that will benefit our community by having more reliable access to true broadband. So you can see some of the youth in our community planting and harvesting foods which keep us healthy and sustainable. It takes a while for fruits and vegetables to get to Old Harbor, as you can imagine, and they're pretty tired by the time they get there. So we are really pleased that we can do something to create a healthier lifestyle for people in our community. Next slide. I mentioned our bison herd. So the Sitka Island Bison and the Alliance is another program where we provide food security and sustenance for our local and traditional village. The herd we've got a really cool program coming up this fall where we're bringing in 4 more bulls from Montana to diversify the herd. It's important to continue to grow the population and also introduce new genetic lines so that we reduce inbreeding and provide genetic diversification. We are upgrading through another grant in our community a processing facility so that we can hopefully bring this amazing, very lean, very healthy protein source not only to our community but to a commercial market, which people come to Alaska by the tens of thousands to visit and to be tourists, and we hope to have commercial products for them to bring home, shelf stable in the future. But for now, we're focused on providing reliable, healthy food sources to our community. Again, all of these things rely on infrastructure, power, water, and electricity, and also connectivity for us to market and to create economic opportunities, and also to maintain and operate our infrastructure in the village. I think that's my last slide. If you want to go to the next one, I think we're going to start a discussion now here, Gary, and I'm happy to talk about a variety of things, both with Old Harbor and our community, the Kodiak Island archipelago, and also Alaska in general, and what we're seeing with an explosion of fiber projects throughout our state.
Well, yeah, this is incredibly interesting, Christina. And I just want to start understand so you're an Alaska Native shareholder, and you described that shares cannot be sold, but it has to be handed down through the family. So what happens if you do not have any family heirs? What happens to that share?
That's a great question. So as part of our self-determination as Alaska Indigenous people, each corporation, village or regional, can decide what they do with their shares. There are certain legal requirements that must be inured to. But for example, we allow for shares to go back to the corporation to then be deployed in the future. We're faced with a blood quantum, I wouldn't say crisis, but we're getting close, where shares were deployed in 1971, and as Alaska Natives pass away, we have a blood quantum thinning, if you will. So as our population grows, more non-natives move into our communities and our population expands, we have to allow for a growth of population, but perhaps a diminish of our blood quantum. If you know the Cherokee Nation, they have a linear affiliation with their tribal membership. And so we're all looking at ways that we can expand our Native shareholder base while staying true to the Indigenous tenets of our corporations. I'll give an example right now. One of the things we're working with right now in Washington, D.C. is the recognition of blood quantum and our ability to harvest marine mammals as a traditional food source and as a traditional practice. And there are 2 governing agencies that oversee the management of marine mammal take, and one recognizes a 25% blood quantum, and that is a requirement. The other one has dictated that it can be either 25% blood quantum, or if you are recognized by your tribal community to be Alaska Native and a tribal member. So giving some ability for our Native community to be to determine who is Native in our community. So we're working through some of those. Even today, over 50 years after the passing of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, we're still working through some of those oversight and regulation with the federal government. I'd like to also mention that I mentioned I'm a shareholder, but I'm also a tribal member. So in Alaska, our Alaska Native and Indigenous population has really three parts to it. It's the three-legged stool: your village corporation of the community you're in, your regional corporation, the region which you are from, and then also your tribal affiliation. So tribes have the government to government, kind of the sovereign trust relationship, which you see with the tribes in the lower 48. We have 250 tribes in Alaska. So half of the tribes in the United States reside in Alaska. And that matches with the village corporations. And then, so we share responsibilities for land development. Alaska Native corporations have the ownership of the land, but we break it down into surface and subsurface. An example of that is in the Kuskokwim region, where I was working on the gold development project with Chalista Corporation. Gold resides on their land, but it's underground. So that's a subsurface ownership. So Chalista Regional Corporation owns the gold. The Kuskokwim Village Corporation owns the access to the gold. So gravel, roads, stream crossings, all of those things. So we have, it's complex.
It's not complex at all. It sounds sounds like Billy Bob Thornton and Landman just trying to figure out all these things. It's crazy, but
thank you. Yes, those relationships have certainly been brought to light to understand access, ownership, and ultimately who benefits.
Well, let's turn it to, so we have a lot of rhetoric in Washington about cost per home and who deserves fiber and who doesn't deserve fiber. And obviously, as I started, Alaska's been left behind, 13% fiber. It's amazing that you have this project and you're going to connect 570 homes. Do you know what that cost per home is? Or what your highest cost?
Yeah, no, the highest cost, of course, is the subsea portion extending from Homer into Uzinki. It remains to be seen what the ultimate economic output will be for this, but the businesses will also pay into this. So that's an opportunity that we're really excited about, because while we're connecting to the homes, it also provides opportunities for the village of Old Harbor to connect in to the tribal offices. We've got a beautiful new tribal building that will provide classes and educational opportunities. So it's a high price tag per home if you want to break it down that way. I think one of the ways that we look at it is Alaska became a state in 1959, and we have not had an investment to this degree since we became a state. And so while many of these basic infrastructure components have built out into other states over decades, this is the first time that we're really seeing any investment. So we think it's priceless.
Well, and also, sustainability appears to be incredibly important to your culture, and just being able to the sustainable nature of getting fiber versus some. So how important is fiber to Alaskans versus other technologies?
When we look at the name of the project, Nunapet, it's our lands, but it's really about connecting our people. And our people, I listen to many of your podcasts, and one of the things that you all talk about is, I think we recognized in the last 5 years, how vital connectivity is to people, to health and wellness, to economies, to education. And that certainly is in the case for every American, but in rural Alaska, it's even more pronounced because we're already isolated by geography. So being isolated from technology and communications it creates an even greater divide for health and wellness, for economies, education. And we rely on technology to connect us to the greater world and to open our world and create opportunities for our villages. We try to stay engaged. We do cultural workshops remotely. We connect shareholders who are all over the world through our digital programs. And these are things that we hope to expand in the future and to really bring the world to Old Harbor, but to bring Old Harbor to the world. We'd love to share our culture and our people, and we can't do that without fiber.
Well, even you talk about culture, Rob Griffin, who's one of our co-chairs of our tribal broadband committee working group, he talks about how important it is to preserve the tribal, the Native American culture, language, and, be able to pass this down to generations. And you can only be able to do that by having fiber connectivity to to preserve your heritage. Can you talk a little bit about, so your expertise, you come from a undersea, subsea fiber company. And, when you look at the slides you show, I just looking at all the rock and mountains and water. So incredibly diverse terrain to be able to deploy. Can you talk about, are you guys using nearshore fiber, and is it your expertise really kind of helped with the subsea part of the project?
The Quintillion project truly was the first of its kind, and we had at one point 12 ships deployed in the water. We had cable laying ships, we had trenching, we had to have marine mammal observers on every vessel 24 hours a day. We, of course, bringing it to shore is a whole other, in terms of directional drilling and, manholes. And it was an incredible undertaking. At the same time, in that part of the world, you had ice scouring. Yeah. And so we had to do years of studies, geophysical, geotechnical mapping of the seafloor to understand where the ice scouring would take place. And the cable, was this thick because it had to be double armored and a Kevlar protective outer layer, and truly an incredible amount of protection around that cable. It'll be less so for the Kodiak, the Nunapet project. We don't have the ice down there that you have up on the North Slope, both year round, and then also, in and out, ice moving, ice scouring. We don't have that. So we have a different type of, yes, it'll be laid on the floor. We'll have to bury as it comes to shore, as you can imagine. We have a lot of fishing boats. We have a lot of cruise ship vessels that come in and out. We've got anchors. We've got, halibut fishermen with long lines and hooks on the floor. So we have to account for all of those things in the design. But, the Kodiak, Old Harbor Native Corporation has already participated in the Kenai Kodiak fiber project a number of years ago. We sold that. So we did a lot of the mapping 15 years ago when we worked on that project. So we've got some institutional knowledge with some of our team. We've got an amazing, very long time leadership team here that I joined this last year. So it's simpler than the North Slope and the Arctic project that I worked on, but certainly not simple by any means.
Well, I mean, it's very diverse and, limited build seasons and so forth. So, Christina, congratulations on your successful so far. And I look forward to you connecting all the, Native Americans and Alaska. It's just such an important project and effort. And, I'm looking forward to being up there on July 17th for our Fiber Connect workshop. So thanks again. And, again, thanks to your team for everything they do. And I hope that everybody looks forward to joining us next week. We're going to have Mike Sanders, Executive Director of the Oklahoma Broadband Office, is going to be talking about their latest $750 million investment in infrastructure for broadband to bring, fiber to 70,000 homes across their state. So you're not going to want to miss that. And again, I look forward to seeing you guys on June 1st to 4th at Fiber Connect in Nashville. So thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Christina. And we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you.